Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds on that significant data breach affecting Hertz, Dollar, and Thrifty customers.
That's right. We've got a pretty detailed overview here written by David Heath that lays out a lot of the facts.
And our goal today is to kind of unpack that, understand what really happened, how bad it was, and, what the key takeaways are.
Exactly. It's more than just a headline. There are real implications for potentially a lot of people. We need to look at the specifics.
Okay, let's start with the scale. That's always the first question, isn't it? How many people were actually affected? It wasn't immediately clear, was it?
No, it wasn't. And Hertz, they haven't released like one single nationwide number.
Right.
But we can piece things together from state-level notifications. These are pretty reliable indicators.
Okay, so what do those tell us?
Well, Recorded Future News reported on the filings in Texas. That number was 96,665 Texas residents.
Wow, okay. Nearly 100,000 just in Texas. That's not small.
Not at all. And then you look at Maine, reported by Security Week, and that was another 3,409 individuals.
So even without a grand total, you add those up and you can see we're definitely talking tens of thousands, maybe more across the country.
Precisely. The point is, even if it's not millions, and Hertz did clarify that those claims were inaccurate, TechCrunch mentioned that it's still a substantial number of people impacted.
Tens of thousands is still a serious number when you're talking about compromised data.
Absolutely.
And what about the financial side? Credit cards were involved, right? Do we know how many?
We know credit card information was exposed. That's clear from the overview. But no specific count of compromised cards has been released publicly.
Okay. So potentially tens of thousands of people, credit card details possibly exposed. That's worrying enough. But it wasn't just credit cards, was it? The range of data seems quite broad.
Oh, definitely. It's actually quite extensive. And it varied from person to person.
What kind of things are we talking about?
Well, the basics, names, contact info, like email, phone numbers, dates of birth, that sort of thing.
Standard stuff, maybe. But then
it gets more sensitive. We mentioned the financial info, the credit card details, but also, crucially, identification documents.
Like what? Driver's licenses.
Driver's licenses, yes. Government-issued IDs, passport information for some people, even Medicare or Medicaid ID numbers.
Jeez. That's a lot of identity theft fuel right there. Passports, too.
Yes, passports in some cases. And it didn't stop there. For some individuals, it went even deeper.
Oh, so?
Social security numbers were compromised for a subset of those affected.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And according to InfoSecurity magazine, even things like sensitive records about injury claims from accidents or workers' compensation claim information.
That's incredibly personal information, far beyond just a credit card number.
Exactly. The variety and sensitivity level is quite high here. It really depends on what information specific individuals had shared or was being processed.
So that leads to the next big question.
Yeah.
How did this actually happen? You mentioned earlier it wasn't a direct hack on Hertz's main computers.
Correct. And that's a really critical point to understand. The breach didn't originate within Hertz's own network infrastructure.
So where did it start?
It started with a third-party vendor they use, a company called Cleo Communications.
Cleo Communications, what do they do?
They provide a file transfer platform. Hertz was using it for apparently some limited data sharing purposes.
Okay, so data was flowing through Cleo's system, and that's where the problem was.
Precisely. The attackers found vulnerabilities in Cleo's platform. It highlights this huge issue in cybersecurity today. Your supply chain, your vendors, they can be a major point of weakness.
And these weren't just any old vulnerabilities, right? They were 0 days. Can you remind us what that means?
Yeah, 0 days. Specifically, 2 were identified, CVE 2024-50623 and CVE 2024-55956.
Okay, those are the technical names.
Right. A 0 day essentially means it's a flaw in the software that the vendor, Cleo in this case, didn't know about.
So they had 0 days to fix it before it was potentially exploited.
Exactly. No patch, no fix available when the attackers first found and used it. These specific flaws were in Cleo's Harmony, VL Trader, and Lexicon platforms.
Makes them incredibly dangerous, I imagine.
Very. It's like having a security hole that even the builders don't know exists.
And in this attack, it wasn't just a one-off event. It happened in stages.
That's right. The overview indicates 2 main phases. The initial exploitation seems to have happened back in October 2024.
October. Wow, that's quite a while before it was discovered.
Yes. And then there was apparently a second wave of attacks leveraging these vulnerabilities in December 2024. So they found the door, came back later.
Who found the door? Do we know who's behind these attacks?
Well, the Clop ransomware group has claimed responsibility.
Clop. I've heard that name. They're pretty notorious, aren't they?
They are. Often described as a Russia-linked cybercrime group, they have a history of major attacks like the big Move It campaign that hit so many organizations.
Right, MoveIt was also file transfer software, wasn't it?
Exactly. They seem to specialize in finding and exploiting these kinds of vulnerabilities in managed file transfer or MFT solutions. It's their modus operandi.
So Clop finds these 0 days in Cleo software, exploits them in October and December, steals data that companies like Hertz were transferring through Cleo.
That's the sequence of events, yes. And Security Week really emphasizes that Hertz's own internal network wasn't breached directly. The pathway was through Cleo.
It's like someone broke into the courier company's truck, not Hertz's main office.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
And TechCrunch mentioned, Clop claimed they hit quite a few companies using this Cleo vulnerability.
Yes, nearly 60 companies, according to Clop's claims. Hertz was just one, unfortunately one of the more high-profile ones, maybe.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. Hertz finds out about this. When was that?
They discovered the breach on February 10th of this year, 2025.
February 10th. And what did they do then? Must have been panic stations.
Well, they launched what sounds like a pretty intensive investigation, a deep data analysis to figure out exactly what data was involved, whose data it was, the full scope.
That sounds like digging through a haystack.
Probably felt like it. That analysis phase, they completed it by April 2nd. So February to April, figuring out the damage.
And once they knew who was affected,
Then came the notification process. That started around April 11th.
how did they notify people?
Multiple ways. Emails, physical letters through the mail, and they also posted notices on their websites, Hertz, Dollar, and Thrifty, presumably.
Standard procedure. Did they have to tell regulators too?
Yes, absolutely. They made filings with the attorneys general in several states. The overview mentions California, Iowa, Maine, Texas, and Vermont specifically, fulfilling those legal duties.
And are they offering anything to the people affected, like help with potential identity theft?
They are. They're offering 2 years of free identity protection and credit monitoring services.
Who provides that?
It's through Kroll, which is a well-known firm in security and risk consulting. That's pretty standard practice after a breach like this.
And they also involve the police.
Yes, they reported the incident to law enforcement as well.
And throughout all this, Hertz maintained that their own systems were safe.
That's been their consistent message, yeah. Cybersecurity Dive reported on this. They're stating there's no evidence their internal networks were compromised. It all points back to Cleo.
Which brings us back to that point. This wasn't just about Hertz, was it? You said Clop hit nearly 60 companies.
Exactly. This Hertz incident, while significant, is really just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
A puzzle created by these Cleo vulnerabilities.
Precisely. Nearly 100 organizations globally were ultimately affected by attacks exploiting these same flaws. It shows the potential ripple effect when widely used software has a critical weakness.
Almost 100. Any other big names involved? Besides Hertz.
Yes, a few others have been reported. WK Kellogg apparently had employee information stolen via the same Cleo issue.
Kellogg's. Wow.
And Western Alliance Bank also reported a breach affecting over 20,000 of their customers, again stemming from these Cleo vulnerabilities. CPO Magazine covered that one.
Kellogg's, a major bank, Hertz.
Yeah.
It really demonstrates the systemic risk, doesn't it? So many companies relying on the same underlying technology.
It really does. These managed file transfer platforms are critical infrastructure for many businesses, but they can also become single points of failure if not secured properly.
It puts a huge spotlight on third-party risk management.
Absolutely. It's a massive challenge. How do you ensure the security of software you don't control? It requires constant vigilance, proactive vulnerability management, not just for your own systems, but for your vendors, too.
Which leads us to maybe the toughest question. Could Hertz have done anything to actually stop this? Or maybe prevent it? Given that these were 0 days in Cleo software.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's complex. 0 days are inherently difficult because, well, they're unknown until they're exploited.
Right. Can't patch what you don't know is broken?
Exactly. However, the fact remains that the entry point was this third-party software. So the focus shifts to the processes Hertz had in place for managing vendors like Cleo.
You mean, like, how thoroughly did they vet Cleo's security in the first place?
That's part of it. Due diligence during selection is crucial, but it's also ongoing. What were the contractual requirements around security? What kind of audits or assurances did Hertz require from Cleo?
So even though Hertz didn't write the code, They still have a responsibility.
Absolutely. They have a responsibility for protecting their customer data, regardless of where it's processed or stored. Ideally, Clio should have had stronger internal processes to find and fix such flaws faster.
You mean Clio maybe could have found these 0 days themselves with better testing?
It's possible. Robust security development life cycles, regular penetration testing, independent audits, these things increase the chances of finding vulnerabilities before the bad guys do.
So if Clio had perhaps invested more in that, or if Hertz had maybe pushed them harder on demonstrating that level of security.
Then yes, maybe this could have been prevented. It's impossible to say for sure with 0 days, but strong, proactive security at the vendor level is the best defense.
It suggests that maybe asking vendors tough questions about their security testing and vulnerability management is really important.
Crucial. And demanding evidence, not just taking their word for it. Things like SOC2 reports, results of penetration tests, vulnerability management policies. It's about shared responsibility. Hertz is responsible for its data. Clio is responsible for its platform security. The system broke down here.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. You're taking a deep dive into this Hertz, Dollar, and Thrifty data breach. Key things.
All right.
It stemmed from 0-day flaws in a third-party file transfer platform from Clio Communications.
Right, not a direct breach of Hertz's own systems. Tens of thousands affected, potentially more.
And a really wide range of sensitive data was compromised: personal details, IDs, financial info, even social security numbers, and injury claims for some.
The Clop ransomware group claimed responsibility, exploiting those Clio vulnerabilities as part of a wider campaign hitting nearly 100 organizations.
Hertz responded, by investigating, notifying customers starting in April, offering credit monitoring via Kroll, and involving law enforcement.
But the bigger picture is really about that third-party risk and the critical need for robust security, especially around vulnerability management, both internally and within the supply chain.
It really underscores how interconnected everything is.
Definitely. Your security is often only as strong as your weakest vendor link, unfortunately.
So here's something to chew on for everyone listening.
Mm-hmm.
We rely so much on third-party software now for everything, right? Banking, shopping, work.
Everything, yeah.
So maybe the crucial question we should all be asking companies isn't just, how do you protect my data? But maybe more importantly, how do you ensure your vendors protect my data? What kind of checks are you doing on that whole ecosystem?
That's a really pertinent question. Understanding the security of the entire chain, not just the company you're directly dealing with.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.